Hey there, it's time to take the lead. Trust your voice, know what you need. Let's break it down.
Welcome to Beyond Clinical Walls with your host, Dr. Bayo.
We'll claim your life.
You're sitting in a hospital room looking at this tiny human you just brought into this world. A nurse comes in with discharge paperwork, goes over a few instructions, and then says, okay, you're good to go. And suddenly you're thinking, wait, you're just going to let us leave with an actual baby? We have no idea what we're doing. That moment when you realize there's no instruction manual, just you and a tiny human who can't tell you what they need, then the conflicting advice floods in from everywhere. If you are new here and you've landed on this episode, welcome. I'm Dr. Bayo, your health advocate. I'm a practicing family medicine physician, and I bring what I see in my clinic into the work that I do on the news, on social media, and to this podcast. As a family doctor, I care for entire families, which means I'm often the one helping new parents navigate those first overwhelming weeks and months, and I get to help take care of mom and baby at the same time. My goal with this podcast is to help you understand your health and the healthcare system so you can advocate for the care you and your family need and deserve. But today, I want to bring in someone who specializes in pediatrics to talk about the first month of having a new baby. Our guest is Dr. Leah Rappaport, a board-certified pediatrician who cares for hospitalized infants and children in Boston. She's built a platform that reaches millions of parents and helps them cut through misinformation. And just like me, she's a mother of two. Dr. Leah, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here.
If you're game, I have a couple of rapid fire questions that I'd love to ask you.
Love it.
Okay.
Love it. Love rapid fire.
So, of course, we're going to start off with something that's quite heavy. So prepare yourself. What do you order at a coffee shop?
I am a soy latte gal with an extra shot. And soy is like kind of out right now, but it should come back in.
I agree. I think it's a great ad. Now, I drink my coffee black, but I still sometimes I'll add soy. Love that.
Little protein.
A little protein. What's one thing you wish every pediatrician would tell new parents before they leave the hospital?
That they're already doing a great job.
Love that. Complete this sentence. The best thing a new parent can do for their baby is
love their baby.
If you could eliminate one piece of parenting advice from the internet, what would it be?
All the guilt around having the right stuff.
I love that you said that. There's so much pressure that you feel like, am I getting it wrong? Or do I have all the right things? And it can feel overwhelming. And then you may not even notice that you're fine in that moment. What's something you are really intentional about teaching your children?
Gratitude.
So that speaks to my heart. So I love that. So thank you for playing along. Let's get some conversation going. I'm just excited to dig into this with you. First, you're just wonderful. I love your content. I love what you're doing. And
thanks.
I just love your energy. Absolutely. For anyone that's listening right now that may be expecting a bundle of joy coming to your family, or you just recently had a baby, I just want to give a shout out to those listening. Congratulations. It's an incredible time, and you want to know what you are doing good at, because as we just mentioned, sometimes you just feel like you're failing at all levels. So let's just start with, how can parents really lean into what they might be doing right when it comes to having a new baby?
I think like the biggest thing that I tell patients, family, friends who have a new baby is that you have to have a little bit of perspective that no one gets through bringing a new baby into this world like completely unscathed. You're going to be tired. It's going to be overwhelming. Different things are happening. So really focusing on the good things that you're doing is critical. I think the thing that I tell parents to focus on the most is making sure they get skin to skin time with their new baby. It's been proven evidence-wise that it's good for mom, dad, baby, but it's also so easy. You don't need any product to do it. You don't need any help to do it. You don't need someone else to do it. Skin to skin, bare chest with your bare baby in a diaper is the best thing that you can do in those first couple of days. And trying to facilitate a way to do that for each parent is really important.
I love that you mentioned that because it's something that is often mentioned after you have your baby, but it's not continued on. Like you see the beautiful pictures in the hospital, skin to skin, but why does it have to stop at that time? It can continue.
It shouldn't. Yeah, it shouldn't.
Right.
And in fact, there's some new data that supports a lot of dads doing skin to skin, that it has like really good outcomes, which is really exciting. And I think something to really encourage dads to feel a little bit more connected during that newborn period is really important too. So I think it's like
that.
your freest thing.
It is. And it allows, because sometimes I've heard in my clinic that dads, sometimes they're very, which I love, transparent, that they feel a little disconnected where, you know, the baby's here, they love the baby, but what do I do? Like I'm changing diapers. I'm having a hard time connecting because mom is breastfeeding or formula feeding and it can be difficult. So that's a great idea for people to think about throughout, from newborn to even when they're just a little bit older, just having that
Yes.
time to connect.
100%. 100%.
Oh, I love it. Now, so you've reached millions of parents. And when we talk about after the first few weeks after birth, what are the essentials to focus on? We've already talked about where you can feel overwhelmed. If there's a parent listening right now, what could they do in the first few weeks just to get through it? And let me give context. I remember after having my first child, people were like, it gets easier as I'm just trying to make it through the day. And they were just like, it gets easier. And I'm like, what does that mean? So can you share a little bit about that?
I feel like I could literally talk for like 20 hours to answer that question. I feel like me having my new babies, I really struggled with a lot of postpartum depression, but even irregardless of that, I think it was really overwhelming to feel like there was nothing to do and everything to do at the same time because you're so profoundly exhausted. If you were the birthing parent, I think in that moment, you don't realize that your body has been through a car crash. Like we don't give enough time and space to the healing of like the birthing parent's body. And I think that that is a huge thing that you need to keep in mind, that you need to heal, you need to eat, you need to rest, you need to hydrate. If you're breastfeeding, that's another huge entity that I can talk about for hours, which is a huge, huge time commitment, learning curve, constant stress. And then lastly, everyone wants to come see the baby and ask you a million questions and do what they want to do. And the truth is that a lot of times it's not exactly that helpful. And so being really thoughtful about visitors and how you invite visitors in and all of that is really helpful as well.
There's so much pressure when you come home with your baby. And as you mentioned, people want to come in, they want to visit, they want to help, but that help can sometimes feel very overwhelming to you because you're trying to be accommodating. I give an example when people come over for the holidays and you want them there, you are excited, but how much stress is it for us to accommodate other people? Your example is fantastic. It is like a car crash. You've brought life into this world and your whole body is adjusting. We've got hormones, we've got physical changes, so many different things. And it can be hard to take that moment for yourself.
Yeah, I made a post about this. If you're planning to go visit a newborn and a new family, you should be asking yourself a few things. The first is literally, what are you bringing? What are you bringing? Food, coffee. Are you going to do laundry? Are you going to cook for them? Are you going to clean? You're not going there in the first couple of weeks to hold the baby. That's not the point. If you're visiting a new family, you should be going for all the other things of support. The point is that the mom and the dad should be holding the baby. And if they don't want to hold the baby, if they want to shower or whatever, then yeah, hold the baby. But that shouldn't be the real reason why you're going. And I always try and like communicate that to people because I think it's really important.
That brings up a point where I remember talking to someone a couple months back and they said, we've lost the meaning of community, meaning when a baby is born, it used to be, and I remember my father actually talking about this. He passed away a few years ago at 99, but to give context, he remembers where like everybody would come around and help that family. It wasn't about to your point, can we hold the baby? It was, can I get you food? Can I clean the house? What can I do for you? And so bringing that back can be so powerful for that family.
Yeah. Bring back the casserole, like figuratively, not literally, right? We need more casseroles. I just remember when I had my son, and it was such a dark time, a friend of mine that I worked with brought over food. She brought over like a pasta, but then on top, she had cut up all this fresh fruit, like washed and cut it. And I was just like eating it because I was like trying to breastfeed. And I was like, this is so good. Like, oh my God, it's so good. And it was just one of those things where I was like, this is the type of thing people need. They don't need you to bring over a baby blanket and sit there while they entertain you. Like, that's not it. It's not it.
Yeah, that is, it's true, because people will come over, they bring a gift, and they're just watching you. And there is just so much
While your
anxiety.
body's like, yeah, while your body is like, while you're bleeding, literally.
And they're
Sorry,
asking,
you should
"How are you
probably cut
doing?"
that. Yeah, you should cut that, but like literally your breasts are leaking and you're bleeding and like you're like, okay, thanks. So happy that I can pour you a cup of tea. This is insane.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. Well, speaking of tea and other things, I'm going to jump into feeding, which can be in itself just overwhelming. And so there's so much anxiety that lives for parents. And I see this in my office all the time. So whether you're breastfeeding, you're formula feeding, or doing both, I think it's important for us to talk about fed is best. And what does that look like?
My thoughts really start like in the most basic form, which is that you cannot walk into a kindergarten classroom and tell who was formula fed and who was breastfed. You can only tell who's loved and who's not. And even then it's difficult, like whether it's by their parents or by their grandparent, you know what I mean? Like really you can't tell. And so taking that pressure off and saying that almost like as a mantra as a new parent is really important. Breastfeeding has incredible benefits. And I think that we, number one, as a society, can do a lot better supporting breastfeeding parents, and as a culture can do better. But I also think that we need to kind of unpack all of the guilt and all of the pressure that we have around feeding infants. For me, I ended up failing breastfeeding, as one would say. Like I could only produce enough to supply my babies with like 1/4 of their nutritional value. So I had to supplement with formula. And especially with my first son, I was profoundly heartbroken about this. Look, I was a pediatrician. I knew how important it was. I had no idea I was going to fail. And fail, even that term is kind of messed up. And so that was really hard for me. And then as I've kind of watched him grow and develop, only in retrospect do I know how ridiculous some of those feelings were. They were authentic to me at the time, but he's incredibly smart. His immune system is great. And I worked really hard to do that. So I think, just to answer the beginning of your question, I think you need to really keep a big dose of perspective as you're welcoming a new baby into this world. And there's a lot of pressure to breastfeed, and breastfeeding is spectacular. We should support breastfeeding. I think some of the lactation consultants that I met during my journey were lifesavers. They taught me so much, and I'm so thankful for that support. But at the end of the day, loving your baby and feeding your baby is the most important thing. I think your follow-up question, which is like how much, when, and all of that stuff, I think every baby is different. The goal as a pediatrician is to see really good weight gain. And so whatever is accomplishing that, how frequently your baby eats and how much they eat, that's all sort of dependent on the baby, as long as they are gaining weight healthily.
I love that you mentioned, you felt like you failed, and a lot of women feel like that guilt. And I felt like that with my first child, because I wasn't able to get her to latch. And this kind of feeling of like, well, why can't I, as I'm trying and trying. And so I ended up pumping. And there was a whole level of guilt with that, where people would say, oh, you're not able to, did you try this? Did you try that? And I think we have to, be careful with our words, because when you ask, did you try this? Switching that into, I'm curious, how has the journey been with it, versus have you tried this? It can make such a difference, because it was so hard for me too. So when you said that, I feel connected with you.
I was just going to say, I feel like, you saying that you struggle with the latch, like I struggled with production, like it's different for everybody. And the where we go for resources, is social media. And there just aren't really like well-measured voices out there trying to de-escalate people. Cause like you're scrolling at the middle of the night when you're pumping, right? You're scrolling in the middle of the night when you're trying to get them to latch. Like, all of that. And it's just a really tough place for new moms right now. And I really feel and see all those pressures.
And that's why having these types of conversations is so essential, because if you can hear another mom say, hey, this was what I struggled with. I mean, even just our conversation right now, Dr. Leah, I feel connected, and I'm not breastfeeding and you're not breastfeeding right now, but we still feel I know, but it's all about, sharing, because to your point, that late night scroll, there's a feeling of isolation and feeling like there's no one else going through. But if you can see or hear somebody else's situation, that can be helpful. Well, that leads me to late night scrolls and not sleeping. Which is a situation that, a lot of parents ask me quite often in my practice. Yeah. I would love to talk about, what does the evidence say about things when it comes to swaddling, room sharing, and what are the non-negotiables for safe sleep?
Okay. So safe sleep is something that you're going to hear about if you have a baby every time you leave the hospital, right? The AAP has very clear guidelines that the goal would be baby in a bassinet, nothing around them, no stuffed animals, no pillows, no extra blankets, swaddled, because they need that little kind of like snug swaddle, flat on their back with nothing over them. They do recommend room sharing. So like having that bassinet in your room, that is shown statistically to decrease the risk of SIDS as well. I will say from personal experience, if you have had a newborn or no newborns, they can be incredibly loud and grunty and insane. And so I was only able to last a couple months with my baby in my room before I literally couldn't sleep. But I think attempt to try to keep them in your room as long as possible would be the goal.
I feel I had 1 out of 2 was a huge grunt and snorer. And I was like, oh my.
So, the grunting.
Yeah. And then you're just alerted, you're just like, oh my gosh, what happened? What happened?
Or you think they're awake to feed, and then you end up waking them up because you're like, you're ready to feed. And then they're like, wait a second, I'm feeding. It's just like a circus.
And they're like, can I get some sleep? It's like, my goodness.
Terrible.
Now, speaking of just in general, the grunting, the noises, a lot of parents ask me about white noise and if they should incorporate that. What are your thoughts on it? I'd love for you to break it down. What is it safe? Yeah. Is it effective? What should parents know?
So I actually just made a post about this. There's some data that's coming out that is showing that essentially prolonged exposure to white noise in animal models can actually hurt auditory processing and development. The thing that's hard is that we do know that some white noise is great for babies. We know that there are 4 S's of soothing a baby, like the swaddle, the suck, the shh, which is essentially a white noise, and the sway. And actually there's 5, and sideline when you like snuggle your baby. But as always, because of these products are coming out, portable white noise machine, the Hatch, the this, the that. And so suddenly we have these things that are creating white noise that you can just buy on Amazon, but don't necessarily have the sort of sound regulations that's right for a baby's ears. So there's actually a sound decibel recommendation from the AAP that you should be following, and you can find it online. And then also you can download an app that's free on your phone and just like put it next to your baby and see if that white noise is too loud for your baby, which I think is a great skill. I also think more doesn't always equal better. Sometimes if your baby is crying, you think they just need more of the white noise or the bottle or the sucking. Like, more doesn't always mean better, right? And it's sometimes hard to remember that when you're in the throes of fatigue. But I think white noise is probably something that we could be doing a little bit less with, to be honest.
That's a good point, because as parents, we're just trying to do anything and everything that we can for our child, whether they're a newborn and even as they get older. And sometimes too much, like you mentioned, can make you miss what you could do less than. And that's a great point, because I've seen parents, and I've done it myself. I'm just rocking as much as I can, just trying, but maybe a little less rock, who knows, could be best for your child in that moment, just to help them settle down. And there's something to be said about extra stimuli can also be, like you mentioned, jarring and can prevent what you are trying to achieve, which is sleep and being able to calm down. So Speaking of trying to calm down, but the opposite, we've got a baby who's crying. Again, it goes back to feeling overwhelmed. What can I do for my baby? Why are they crying so much? In those early weeks, is there anything specifically normal for crying? And what are your tips for helping parents?
Yeah, I think first off, like talk about a humbling experience. All the nonsense I said as a pediatrician without having kids was just like wild. Like I would say things like sleep when the baby sleeps to new moms, which is just like a crazy thing to say. So I think it's really hard as a pediatrician to know how to answer some of these parenting questions without having some of that experience. I would say the big thing, crying in general is a tough hitting question, right? Because every baby is different and every baby has very different temperaments. And so the rule of thumb that I've given both myself as a parent and my friends who are parents, but also as a pediatrician, and even when I'm in the hospital, like when I'm seeing if a baby is sick versus not sick, is essentially using like those 5 S's, those like ways to soothe the baby. And typically those things will work. So just to repeat them, it's swaddling, sucking like a pacifier, shushing or shh, which kind of mimics the aorta when they were in utero, and swaying and sideline. So all of those things, if you can get a baby to calm down with those sort of skills, typically that's pretty normal crying. Or if they have a very dirty diaper, that's usually not why they're crying, by the way, or if they're hungry. If those things aren't working and they're still inconsolable, I would say it's okay to feel a little sort of verklempt, if you will, and talk to your pediatrician. Sometimes if that's happening consistently and you really aren't seeing any change, they could have colic, which is a period developmentally where they cry significantly for multiple times a day, for multiple hours a day, which frankly is just bad luck and you grow out of it. My brother had colic and apparently it was a nightmare, but he's a totally fine, fully functioning adult in society now. But I think that those are kind of my steps and my advice to both parents, myself, and when I'm in the hospital.
And I think even just highlighting the diapers and feeding, because there's a lot of like, oh, they're crying because their diaper is dirty. I love that you kind of, you touched
It's
on
like
that.
never really that. I was also going to say that my other favorite thing, which I sort of know is controversial, but when people are like, my baby doesn't like to be swaddled, I'm like, well, they haven't been swaddled right. You know what I mean? Like most babies like to be swaddled, like a little tight snug.
There's something to be said about that tightness, that feeling of safety that swaddling provides. And I think if people can understand what it gives to your baby, it can help you understand why that can be essential.
They were in the strongest muscle in the human body, which is the uterus, packed tight in the strongest muscle, stronger than any other muscle in the human body. They like it tight, you know?
Yes. Well, I think we forget that though. It's like, oh, the baby's here. And it's like, well, no, remember where they were for 9 months. Well, here's a reality check. According to the CDC, about 1 in 8 women report symptoms of postpartum depression after having a baby. That means in every baby play group, in every hospital nursery, in every new parents class, multiple mothers are struggling. From your perspective, why does this matter so much? And what can families and friends do to help? And I would just want to be honest about this. I mean, it's hard because all of us have our own different struggles, because it is okay to ask for help. And we hear that, but sometimes it could be hard to say those words, I need help.
Yeah. I think the biggest sort of thing that if anyone is listening to this podcast, if they hear from me, it doesn't have to be a dark time, and there is help. Like if you are looking around and it feels very dark and it feels like you can't do anything else, I'm just here to say that it doesn't have to be that way and you don't have to feel that way. And I think what's really hard is that you are waiting to see your OB at 2 months. But from a pediatrician standpoint, the most important thing I can do for that baby is take care of the mom, like to make sure the mom is okay. They are a duo. They are a little combo, and they are one entity for many months. And so you should be being screened for postpartum depression at all of those well baby visits. And you can talk to your pediatrician about any of those feelings that you can have. And I also want to bring attention to the fact that it's not just things that are feeling dark, but anxiety, having running thoughts, being super anxious about the noises that your baby is making. Within reason is very normal. But in general, I think we have sort of isolated our birthing mom baby parent situation so much in modern society that it can be really lonely, and you don't even know who to ask for help, because everyone who comes with their silly little blanket, like asking for a cup of tea, they want to hear how things are going and they want it to be good. They don't want to hear how terrible it is. And the expectation is that you're happy and over the moon in love with this new baby, but really sometimes that baby feels like a huge shift in your life and totally overwhelming. And that's okay too. That's actually normal.
I love how you highlight it's not just the dark, it can be anxiety provoking, because all of a sudden, if you went from a party of two to a party of three, party of four, if you had twins, triplets, there's a lot to take in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where your new norm is different. And I remember after I had my first, where I was just mentally trying to adjust, and I'll just say this, that there's another person living in my house. And I know that sounds silly. It was just weird. Like, yes, carried this baby. I know I had a baby, but the reality of that someone was in my home was really challenging for me, even though I loved this human being. It was just a lot for me to process. That was, a reality for me.
I think that the reality looks different for everyone. And I find a theme that I hear, regardless of what the feelings are, is that there's all of this time during the day when there's a lot of support. But when you have a newborn baby, you're living in increments of 3 hours, right? And so I used to joke with some of my friends that we were like sundowning, like older people, like when the sun would start to go down, there would be this feeling of darkness, like during the day you can go out and be out and see people who want to visit you and all that stuff. But then you were just really alone for that period of night, which is so different until you have a baby, right? Like before you'd be asleep or you'd be watching a movie or whatever. And then there's this like very different schedule that you're adjusting to as a human. And I think that was a really isolating time too. And I think that in some ways having social media and things that you can do during those periods of time is great, but it can also be really dark. And I think making sure to reach out to the right people and ask for help, whether it's anxiety or feeling just strange or any of those things, it's not something that we need to have any shame or guilt about. It's very normal.
Agreed. And in my practice, I tell my parents it's okay to give yourself a timeout. It's something I've said my entire since medical school and residency, and I work with the sexual assault response team, all kinds of things. And so I tell all my new parents, give yourself a timeout. If you decide to go to your bedroom, to the pantry, and hang out for a few minutes, your baby's going to be okay. But you need to allow yourself to be okay. And so that's the advice I give to every new parent visit, and I remind them on each one. I appreciate this conversation, just highlighting that. This brings me to the conversation of vaccines. Now, there's a lot happening in our world, and I just want to highlight when it comes to vaccines and how parents can feel confident with all of the misinformation, all the things that we continue to see that are not based in evidence. How do you suggest a parent navigate this? There's so much fear that is online that is unfortunately impacting decision-making for their kids.
So I think when you take a step back and think about the first month, I would probably group the vaccines that we're talking about here as things that can happen prenatally. So like right now you can get the RSV vaccine as a pregnant mom, and you can, when your baby is born, get vitamin K, which is not a vaccine, but a vitamin that is very integral to make sure that babies don't have life-threatening bleeding, and the hepatitis B vaccine, which is very controversial and has recently been deemed as not recommended by the CDC, but is recommended by the AAP. I would say the biggest thing that I have seen in my time as an attending physician that has shown me the magic of modern medicine has been this RSV vaccine. As a hospital pediatrician, I have lived my career taking care of very sick infants with RSV, needing to be intubated on positive pressure, very, very sick, impacting families for weeks to months because of a hospitalization. And I do not exaggerate when I say I am almost not seeing it at all right now. Like our wards are empty of it when I go to work. And I've never seen something like that. So from my perspective, if anyone were to ask me whether they should do that or not, and we're seeing very, very, if any, side effects other than like a local reaction. And so I would say it is an incredible, incredible advancement of modern medicine. Hepatitis B and vitamin K have always been sort of controversial in certain groups of people who have not wanted to do any sort of vaccines whatsoever. And I think what the most important thing that I can do for you, the listener, is to say you need to talk to your pediatrician and your OB. And the reason is individual questions can be answered better individually. And doing shared decision making is the best thing you can do. Instead of brushing off your pediatrician or your OB or your nurse practitioner or your midwife, make sure you just ask these questions. The point is to discuss. I can sit down and have a conversation and address all of the concerns that people are finding on TikTok, like one at a time, slowly. I can't do that here, right? Because I don't know the specific questions, but I would say that almost any pediatrician that you talk to will be able to address these questions. You just have to give them the time and the moment to answer instead of just assuming that we're out there to hurt newborn babies, which is just a wild take.
I think that part is important to mention. As physicians, we don't want your child to be sick. We don't want to see them in the hospital.
Yeah.
And so if you can have that framework and know that we are in your child's best interest to feel better and be as healthy as possible, that part is important. And I think a lot can happen in a doctor's room where there's questions asked back and forth, and there can be feeling of each side not being heard. And I think it's on the patient side, it's on the doctor side to really have a conversation that's not filled with assumptions, that's not filled with feeling like you are being dismissed on either side. When we can get to that space where both parties can say, well, this is where I'm coming from. Or I always share with patients to ask their doctor, help me understand, what your thoughts are behind this. And then having, of course, the doctor listen as well. And that can really help overall help your child get the best care possible. As we talk about, we want your child to be healthy. We want them to stay out of the hospital. What are some of the things that parents can be mindful of if they think their child is sick? If they think, oh my gosh, it's 9 p.m. and my child has a fever. Do I go to the ER? Do I not go to the ER? Can you give a couple of like red flags? And I know it's hard because every child's, different, that parent should think about going to the ER.
I will say no one will ever fault you if you are concerned about the health of your baby, bringing them to medical treatment, medical care. Like, I will never guilt a new parent for being scared for their infant for showing up. Maybe it wasn't an emergency, maybe it was, but I will tell you that parents know their children, parents know their babies, and no one will ever guilt you for doing it. It's never the wrong decision to ask for help. That just should be noted. When you're thinking about newborn babies, they're like the most vulnerable population we have in pediatrics. So between the days of 0 days and 60 days, if that baby has a fever, they need to be evaluated by your pediatrician and or brought to the hospital. Between 0 days and 30 days, they need to be brought to the hospital. And that's because they have a high risk of having infections because their immune system isn't as strong at that period of time. I would say any difficulty breathing, changing color, all of those things that you would be scared if you were a mom holding your baby. If you are scared, you need to call. And that's okay. And no one's going to guilt you for that.
Beautiful answer. I tell every parent, I'm like, thank you for coming in. Thank you.
100%.
I do that. I've always said that. Like, I will never. And anytime that if you were to face that, where you go in with your baby, your child, and you feel dismissed or gaslit because you're there, I tell you, that's not the right place for you. You need to stand up, get a second opinion, advocate for yourself.
Or come back to this podcast and we'll remind you, like, you're doing the right thing, mom, dad, parent.
I love it. So, as we talk about advocacy and we talk about navigating, getting the right pediatrician, we've talked about lactation, how important they are, the red flags for the ER. And it was perfect timing. We talked about if you feel like you're being dismissed in that moment. For parents who are listening right now, if you've heard all of the advice that we've given, and you feel well equipped to try your best to, of course, navigate the healthcare system. If you end up facing a situation where you are dismissed in that moment, what would be one advice that you would give that parent to help advocate for their child?
I think the phrase that I have met best with when I have had parents who felt like they haven't been heard is saying, literally, I don't feel like you're hearing me. Because I think the instinct is to get angry. Understandably, I would be pissed. Like if things were happening with my kid and I'm not being heard, I get angry, right? And that's appropriate. But maybe right before you get angry, saying something along the lines of like, I don't feel like you're hearing me. Because I think in the hubbub of medicine, sometimes we're moving fast, we're checking boxes and we keep it moving. And that is actually a benefit to everyone, right? The more people we can see, the better we can make people, get you out of the ER, get you out of the hospital, get you out of the clinic, et cetera. But sometimes even just saying that one phrase can sort of pause and recalibrate a clinician or a nurse or an MA. And I think that just articulating that sort of dissonance between you and your relationship is sometimes enough to just stop and restart. If that doesn't work, then I agree with you. Asking for a second opinion, everyone has a right to a second opinion. I would say that when people ask me for a second opinion, it's like my pleasure to figure out how to get them one. Like my pleasure. They should ask for a second opinion. That's totally normal.
It is. And it should be the norm when it comes to if someone says, people have asked me, I'm like, yes. And I've shared with people, if you are met with a level of agitation when you ask for that, there's something wrong. Because in medicine, it's a team sport and we all are working together and helping each other. And that's important. And so I also want to I love the phrase, I don't feel like you're hearing me. I often give people like the 3 Ps. It's pause, push, and probe. And so you pause in that moment and you're like, what do I feel like I'm being dismissed? Do I feel like I'm being gaslit? And then in that moment, you can kind of probe a little bit more. Like you said, I don't think you're hearing me. And then you push if you still don't, get the answers that you deserve. So Dr. Leah, I really appreciate how beautiful this conversation has been. And I love the work that you're doing. You
so happy
are
to be
sharing.
Here.
Well, I'm so happy to have you share clear evidence-based guidance that people can actually use. And you've taken so many topics that are hard sometimes in our world that we live right now for people to understand. And you've made it manageable. You've made it practical. And most importantly, because this comes from my heart, you've given parents the permission to trust themselves. So I think you are doing a fantastic job. And for those who want to learn more about Dr. Leah, you can find her on social media, where she continues to provide honest, practical guidance for parents. And we'll have all the links in our show notes. Dr. Leah, any final thoughts?
No, I'm just really happy to be here. And I think you saying that, I wish I had more trust in myself as a new mom. And I think we can do better, building up these new parents and making sure that they know that they're exactly the right person that their baby needs.
Yes, I love that. So did something in this episode click for you? Share it with someone who might need to hear this, because here's the truth. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be informed, supported, and confident enough to trust yourself and your instincts. The more you understand about your baby's health and the healthcare system, the better advocate you'll be for getting them the care they need and deserve. Your baby just needs you and doing your best. And you're already doing better than you think. You've got this.
Love it.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Clinical Walls. If you learned something new today, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps us reach more people who could benefit from these insights too. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We've got amazing content coming, including great episodes with the health creators you love.
You've heard the truth, now take the lead. Stand for yourself, know what you need. One step closer, you've made your mark. Keep showing up and light the spark.